What happens to our bodies after death can be considered quite profound. Whether somebody is buried in their bodily form or they are cremated and buried, are they donating their organs or not? There are all different things that are done with the body after the spirit inside of them has left. In the Catholic Church, it is highly recommended to be buried in your full human form. Cremation is allowable. However, the Vatican has stated that you are not supposed to scatter your ashes. You're not supposed to put them in mementos like jewelry to remember your loved one nearby. You're not supposed to divide the ashes. You're supposed to still treat the ashes as the whole person and have them buried in sacred ground. But also, I mean, science shows that it is easier to process and grieve and mourn a loved one if their body is left intact. If you see them passed on, that you see their lifeless body, it's actually it aids in that grieving process, even though it might feel to some overwhelming or that it would make it worse. Scientifically, it is said to aid in that. So I remember, we've had several different conversations in my family where wills and testaments and powers of attorney, we all have all of those things, and that the urging of some of us to say, please do not be cremated because we want to be able to properly process your death. Now, that said, my older brother was cremated and he was buried in a hole in a cemetery. And so I think that, Jesus being buried, what St. Thomas Aquinas talks about today, the burial of Jesus, I think it's just so important to note that he wasn't cremated. He didn't donate his organs, which, wasn't a thing back then. But, I think, one of the things one of my brothers told me some time ago, so I don't know if it's still true or not. I tried looking it up, but I couldn't find anything, is that there is no saint yet that has been an organ donor. Obviously, the church says it's very charitable. It's a good thing to do. It's a heroic act, all of these different things. And yet there are still ethical qualms with organ donation for whether or not you take someone off life support or not. If there's brain activity, the different levels of when the body is suddenly seen as a medical vessel instead of a whole human person. How does that end up changing the trajectory of care, so to speak? But nonetheless, I digress. Being an organ donor is a very charitable and loving thing to do. However, to my knowledge, there have been no blesseds or saints, that have actually been organ donors that have donated their organs. And so anyway, so obviously God can make all things good. And it's just, that's one of the theological, philosophical conversations to have about organ donation though, right? Like if somebody has died and then there's the resurrection, but their heart is in somebody else, like how does that work when we have bodies? It's an intriguing conversation to have when you start getting into the weeds of it, I suppose. And I have barely scratched the surface on that conversation, but I have listened to a few different levels of input about it. Not enough to have a formal declarative type stance, but I will say my husband is passionate about donating organs, and so I am currently on the donor list as well, but I am so hesitant about it, especially with my whole I have squeamish natures around me being deceased, and so there is something about, like, I have said I don't even really want an autopsy, and obviously all those things would have to be circumstantial, and I don't know. So it's just obviously Christ was speared in the side. They didn't necessarily have autopsies back then, I don't imagine, but as it is, he rose from the dead, from his tomb. He was laid in the tomb, he was buried, and then he rose again. And St. Thomas Aquinas says that was good because it first off just proved that he had really died, and that because he rose from the grave, it gives hope of rising again through him to all others who lie in their graves. And it was an example for those who by the death of Christ are spiritually dead to sin. And so I think, it's basically just supporting the fact that Christ has died, and since he rose, we also will rise again one day. And I think just treating our bodies after death as if they will be that they will rise again. I think about Christ in his transfigured form, how he had the wounds in his hands and feet. And it's curious to me as to, people who have autopsies. Will they have that Y-shaped scar on their transfigured body, or will they not be because it was post-mortem? I don't know. I don't think any of us will know until, we're in heaven. Different things about tattoos have been discussed, right? Anything that aided in our salvation will remain on our bodies in heaven. And so it's just so, all of that discussion is so interesting to have with people who are well versed in it, because I have just so many curiosities about it, even though I'm sure we all do. But I think there are probably a lot of teachings out there that I just haven't even had the opportunity to expand my mind on yet, in regard to that. But just talking about Christ's burial makes me go in that direction and think about our bodies after death. I think about the saints that haven't decomposed at all. I guess I haven't been Catholic long enough here, but that they stay in their original state. Saints that don't decompose, the incorruptibles. That's right. And so, it's like you think about those. And if we want to be an incorruptible saint, would an autopsy really be what we would want? Would organ donation really be what we would want? Are all of these things really something that could make this possible? And so I don't know. I'm always curious to discuss that, though. Always interested in diving deeper in that conversation, because I feel like there must be just so many layers. And I don't know if there have been revelations by particular saints about those particular topics. If you know of any, or a book or something, I would be interested in researching that a little bit more as well. Any of those topics, right? There's a huge range for after death topics that can be discussed. So, but that's what it brought up for me today. And I'm just glad that Jesus was still in his full form. And I continually wonder how cremation will take place. Obviously, it's from dust we come and to dust we will return. And even if we're not cremated, obviously our bodies decay and disintegrate and still turn to dust. And so Christ will have a way of bringing our bodies into the transfigured nature. But obviously in the 3 days that he was dead, he didn't have time to decay. He didn't have time to turn all the way to dust and then be reconfigured in his transfigured form. So it's interesting. It's all just right. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. So anyway, curious about all of your thoughts on that as well. Obviously, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can head over to YouTube where this is also uploaded. But otherwise, just leave your thoughts in the comments, and I'll look forward to chatting with you there. And if not there, I'll chat with you tomorrow. Enjoy your day. Talk to you soon.